Welcome back, you guys. Kick back and relax as we dive into another episode of Skip to Saturday. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. For today's episode, I brought someone back from season 1. And in case you missed it, I'll reintroduce him to you guys. Today's guest has spent nearly 2,000 hours in the cockpit, teaching everyone from rookies to pros how to master the skies. Currently, he is quite literally helping pave the road to the stars in the aerospace industry. He's an FAA-certified safety expert, a commercial pilot, and most importantly, he's the man who taught me to never give up on my dreams. Please welcome my dad, Balkar. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate.
Thank you for coming back on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for the invite. Great to be back again.
So we're going to get right into it. Now, the reason why I brought you here for this episode is because not me, but just I think the general public, they saw a lot of plane crashes in the last year or so, right? Mm-hmm. Just even yesterday, there was a plane crash in San Diego in the ocean, and that was a Cessna 414, I believe. You know a lot about that, but not to get too technical, but all the 6 people in that plane died, and I feel like when you hear a lot of those stories, either back to back or very frequently, you start to think like, oh my God, what if that was me? Or what if I'm the next person to go in that way, right? So I feel like that develops a lot of fear of flying. And I also know that it's much safer in a plane than it is in a car, right? Okay. So let's start from the beginning. So what are the common causes of plane crashes, and how do these often differ from public perception?
Well, I think one of the things if you read about airplane crashes, and in probably most is true for most other crashes as well, or other accidents and so on, it's usually a chain of events. It leads from initial point where things begin, and during that point and leading all the way up to the end where the accident happens, there are many points, things that happen in between that could have been altered or changed had things been done slightly differently. And mostly a lot of that happens because of human error, really. I mean, airplanes generally don't crash because something breaks down and it just crashes. There's usually a lot of events that lead up to it. And the way pilots or humans handle that determine the outcome in a lot of cases. Is the human error in not doing things properly that ends up leading to that event.
Human error. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, does that happen with the pilots, or was there something that wasn't properly inspected before the flight?
So you can break it down into a number of different areas. I mean, humans are involved all the way through, way before the flight even begins, all the way through to the end. And when we look at that, we talk about people in the maintenance area that maintain the airplane. We talk about the people that dispatch the airplanes, that set up the flights and how the airplane is going to fly its flight, and the crew that actually fly the airplane, all the way to the ATC, air traffic control, that helps them along the way. So there's a lot of human interaction that happens, and any failure along those lines, as you can see, we talked about the chain of events, right? There's a chain of different people that are involved, and at the bigger level, any chain failing can cause an accident. But within those areas, there's a lot of more fidelity, more smaller issues that can be looked at as things being not done properly, which lead up to an accident.
And then there's also that, I don't want to say famous, but I feel it's very well known in the aviation community. I forget the name of it, but you have to remind me. But it's that one plane crash. Oh gosh, I can't say it. There you go. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that, because I know that it's something that it could have been prevented.
It's funny you bring that up, because that was I've always been interested in airplanes, and I remember at the age of about 13, going out and buying the newspaper and seeing these big headlines, the front cover of one of the worst aviation accidents that had ever happened then, or
Mm-hmm.
even up till today, probably.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I mean, I can briefly go through the details of what happened. It was
Yeah.
a case of where the whole chain of events started way before the accident,
Mm.
where all these airplanes were flying into one of the islands in Tenerife,
Mm-hmm.
and what ended up happening, there was a bomb that had gone off at the destination airport, so all these airplanes had to divert to the
Mm.
airport in Los Rodeos.
Okay.
So this is a smaller airport. It only has one runway, one taxiway, so it
Mm-hmm.
can't handle that kind of traffic, and it can't handle those size of airplanes. So now you have this chain of events where there was a bomb that happened at a different airport at the destination. Airplanes got diverted to this airport, Los Rodeos. And now
Oh.
you have a number of airplanes that are sitting there wanting to refuel in some cases or just waiting to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening is essentially when the time came to have them take off again,
Yeah.
airplanes were still refueling, so people had to wait. So all these chain of events that had started happening all led up to the point where there was delays, and these delays led to the point where one of the jumbo jets, a KLM jumbo jet, was taxiing back on the runway, which is called a taxi back on the runway, ready, getting itself ready for takeoff. And soon after that, the Pan American jumbo jet was cleared to taxi behind it. The
Mm-hmm.
problem was because there were so many delays, it was later in the day. There's a huge amounts of fog that started coming in and started causing visibility issues where you couldn't really see very far ahead.
Okay.
Now, a lot of things came into play here. You have two airplanes on a runway which can't see each other. The KLM is ready and turned around for takeoff. And ATC gives them some communications. They mistake it that they are cleared for takeoff, and the Pan American jumbo jet is still on the runway.
Oh God.
So one of the failures there was, obviously the chain of events has already happened up till this point, many things leading to this point,
Right. Right. Right.
right? If the bomb hadn't happened, you wouldn't have been here. If the planes didn't have
Yeah.
to if they didn't have to refuel, this would not have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the fog hadn't come in, this would not have happened. If the two
Right.
planes weren't taxiing on the same, so all these chain of events happen,
Yeah.
and the other, so that's a communications was one of the big issues where the plane wasn't KLM wasn't cleared for takeoff, and they
Okay.
assumed they were. And the other big
How does one assume that they were?
So when you're flying with these big airlines, you're flying what they call IFR, instrument flight rules. And
Okay.
when you normally take off, you get a clearance to take off. You can't take off without that clearance from
Right.
ATC.
Right. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is when you are getting your flight plan from
Mm-hmm.
ATC, they
Mm-hmm.
also give you another clearance. That's a different clearance. And it tells
Okay.
you are clear to go from this point to this point to this point, but that's not a clearance to take off. So you have to have two different clearances. One is for your flight path, and one is to actually
Okay.
take off.
Oh. And
So
so
when
were they mistaken
they
with
were
the
they
one
were
that
mistaken, yeah, they were told you are clear to this point, and the captain understood that to mean we're going to have to take off.
Oh my
We are
gosh.
cleared for takeoff, and they decided to. And the other chain of events there was in the captain's mind.
Mm-hmm.
They only had a short amount of time left because if they delayed the flight anymore, they would
Mm-hmm.
have exceeded the number of hours they can fly, and they would have had to put up passengers in hotels and pay them money. So
Oh.
they didn't want to do that. That's one of the pressures sometimes captains can have.
Oh.
So that was another chain of a link in the chain which caused
Okay.
the end result, right?
Right. Right.
And the other thing was there is a lot of cultures, especially Eastern cultures, and this was KLM was a German airplane, so in Europe I
Mm-hmm.
think the culture was still like that, where the captain is a final authority and nobody else wants to really question him.
Oh.
I mean,
Okay.
in this case, the first officer, the co-pilot, had told the captain, "Hey, we're not cleared for takeoff," and the captain decided to abort or stop the takeoff. But then he got more irritated and decided to take off anyway. And the second time, the first officer did not speak up.
Oh. Okay. So because he didn't speak up, or if he had spoken up, I should say, that could have been prevented.
That would have broken that link, one of the links, where he
Mm-hmm.
could have said, "No, we're not taking off. We're not
Mm-hmm.
cleared yet."
Mm.
And he had kind of made that note or voiced that concern, but the captain
Yeah.
ignored it.
So when they took off,
Mhm.
so how did that crash happen? Like, was it head on? Was it like, they were taking off and then the other plane was right underneath it and then they were rising up to the
Climb.
what is yeah, they were climbing up and then they just met there and that's when the crash happened. Like, was it
So
on the runway or was it up in the air?
it was pretty much right on the runway.
Oh,
The Pan American Airlines, the Pan American aircraft that was coming, the jumbo, because the fog was coming in, they heard the communications over the radio and they realized that the other plane had started their takeoff.
uh-huh.
But they weren't sure where they were on the runway, and they weren't sure where they were supposed to exit the runway because they were taxiing on the runway.
Oh my
All
God.
right. So when they realized that, oh, this is not good because they're taking off,
Yeah.
they tried to find an exit off the runway as soon as possible. And as they started to turn towards that, the first officer looked through the window on the right side
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
saw this airplane, literally either the lights or something coming through the fog. And they tried to expedite or they tried to rush
Oh
off the
my
runway, but they weren't able to make it. The KLM, on the other hand, was not going fast enough to take off, but they tried to take off anyway. So
Mhm.
they lifted off basically, a small amount, maybe tens of feet off the ground,
Mhm.
and basically hit the Pan American right in the middle and broke that in two, essentially.
How many people were on that flight?
On that flight, basically, there was about a total of 583 fatalities
Oh
on
my
the two
God.
flights. Yeah,
That's so heartbreaking.
it's heartbreaking. Family. Um, um, there was even situations where, like, some passengers decided not to get back on board because they wanted to visit. They were going to fly back to this airport anyway,
Okay.
and
Oh, so
but
they missed their flight.
they purposely missed it because they didn't want to fly to the destination and come back.
Mhm.
And then their friends carried on going, but they look back and it's a huge heartbreak for them to say,
Mhm.
"Wow, this is the guilt of survivors, right? Just like I should have
Yeah.
been in that plane as well."
Right, right, right. I don't know how I that's hard. Like, for someone who survives that it must be
Yes.
really, really difficult.
Hmm.
Okay, so with the plane crashes, right?
Hmm.
I know that there's a black box in each plane, right? That's the
Yes.
one that they retrieve to
Yep.
see when an accident like that happens. They retrieve that and then they go through that over and over again to see what happened. The black box essentially is the thing that records everything that happens in the cockpit, right?
There's actually two. There's
There's
what
two.
we call
Okay.
yeah. There's what we call the CVR and the FDR. The CVR is a cockpit voice recorder.
Okay.
So the cockpit voice recorder basically records all the audio, all the sounds in the cockpit. So
Mm-hmm.
when the pilots are talking amongst each
Mm-hmm.
other, if they're pressing switches, if there's alarms going on, you can hear those alarms going on.
Mm-hmm.
If the flight attendant wants to come in with a cup of coffee, she opens the door, you can hear the door opening and saying and asking for
Oh.
coffee. And so anything that happens audio wise, noise wise, volume, sound wise, gets recorded on the cockpit voice recorder. So that helps, the investigators to figure out what was happening, how the pilots were interacting with each other, what was going on in the cockpit. But more importantly, or just as importantly, there's a flight data recorder, the FDR. What that does is it basically records every single thing, literally, that's happening on the controls. So how much power was set on the engines, what was the speed, what was the pilots
Mm-hmm.
doing in the
Mm-hmm.
controls, what buttons were they pressing at the time. So they want to make sure that they weren't doing anything out of the ordinary that
Mm-hmm.
could have caused that crash. So as you mentioned, um, the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder, these are devices that even if a plane crashes in the sea, and this was the case of the Air France, one of the Air France crashes that happened in the Atlantic, um, the flight data recorder and this cockpit voice recorder, even in the deepest of the oceans, they can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And the Air France one, for example, wasn't recovered until 2 years later.
2 years
2
later.
years later, and
Wow.
the NTSB and the flight the accident investigators were able to recover it,
Mm-hmm.
and from that figure out what was going on at the point the accident happened.
What does a typical investigation look like? And how do like the authorities determine the cause? Like I know that the black box is going to be a huge
Sure,
factor in all of that.
right. Um, I mean, in the case of the Air France airplane, I think it was 19. Um, let's see, the Air France was happened around 1990, I think it was.
Okay.
And what ended up happening in that case, like I said, that they didn't actually find the flight data recorders until 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, what they're going to do is they need to eliminate a lot of causes that could have caused the accident, right? For example, was it a bomb that brought the airplane down? Was it
Okay.
a missile that hit the airplane? Was there something
Mhm.
else in the air that hit it maybe? Did the pilots do something wrong? Did they do
Mhm.
something incorrect or that was unsafe? So the way to do that is they'll the NTSB, flight accident investigators, not only will they look for the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder because those are very important, but they'll also pull up all the pieces of the airplane they can find and they reconstruct that airplane in a big hangar.
Oh.
So they build that airplane up to as much as they can with the pieces that they have,
Mhm.
and then they use that to determine if there was anything obvious that caused a crash. For example, if there was a bomb,
Mhm.
you'd see certain parts of the airplane would be exploding outwards or exploded outwards.
Uh-huh.
So they look for things like that could have caused it, or even in cases where a certain thing happened, and maybe the airplane broke up into two. They want to figure out why did it break up. So they look in that area to determine was there other causes that they could find.
Oh, okay.
Then they look at the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder to see what was happening at the time. Were the pilots flying normally? Were they concerned? Did something happen? And then they correlate that data with what's on the flight data recorder to see what was the airplane doing at the time? How fast was it going? How high was it
Mhm.
going? Was it turning? Was it level? All these things, all these clues they put together to determine what actually caused the accident.
So how long does that process take usually? I'm pretty sure it's dependent on the accident,
Yeah.
but like normally or typically I should say, how long does that process take?
I would say I don't know the exact numbers offhand, but I mean,
Mhm.
you're looking at anything from many months or several to many months
Mhm.
to a few years even.
Oh, okay, okay.
Like in the Air France, it wasn't 3 years until 3 years later they actually provided the report of what happened.
Oh, wow.
So it took them 3 years, all the way from finding pieces of the airplane, the wreckage,
Mhm.
the flight data recorder, and putting things together to figure out what happened, and to
Mhm.
come to the conclusion that they came to was 3 years later.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there was another
That's
Swiss air flight where
mhm.
there was a fire that started in one of the wires, some of the wires, and when they put that plane together to figure out what was happening, it was amazing to watch them figure out where things started and nail it down to what the issue was.
See, that kind of stuff like really scares me because I'm just
Mhm.
like and it's like very in like the fire. That can happen on any airplane, right?
Right.
Right. So like that kind of stuff scares me because I'm like, you can be so happy to go on your vacation and
Mhm.
then you have no idea what can happen
Right.
on that flight.
Mhm.
Like, what is your advice to someone that who, either has a fear of flying
Right.
or developed a fear of flying after hearing
Okay.
these kind of stories?
Well, one of the things I think the general public may not appreciate as much
Mm-hmm.
is unlike other accidents that you see in cars, for example, or other accidents that we see around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said in the beginning of this podcast, the show that you mentioned that flying is one of the most safest forms of transportation,
Mm-hmm.
and that is still true.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't happen just because. If you look at the flying regulations that the FAA came out with originally, wherever the FAA was named way back when in the 1920s, the original regulations were only 45 pages long, the rules and
Mm-hmm.
regulations on what you can do and so on while flying. The regulations today stand at about 1,100 to 1,100 to about 1,200 pages.
1,200 pages.
1,200 pages.
Oh, wow.
And all these are rules that came about because the FAA look at cases that happen or accidents that happen or things that go wrong, and they make a rule to eliminate that or prevent that from
Mm-hmm.
happening again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of cases or examples like that where the rules have come out to prevent the accidents, right?
Mm-hmm.
One such example is there was a San Diego Pacific Southwest Airlines airplane that came down in San Diego around 1978. And what used to be happening in the old days is, the crew would be happily talking amongst themselves about things that were not related to flight.
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody assumes everything's going well. In this case, air traffic control had told them there was an airplane ahead of them, a smaller plane like a Cessna four-seater,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they were told that it's ahead of them and they need to keep an eye on that so that he can avoid it. And unfortunately, the pilots looked out, they saw the plane, but they didn't look in the right place, and they saw a different plane. So
Mm.
they assumed they had seen the plane.
Oh,
And
okay. Okay.
unfortunately, the plane that the air traffic control had told them was a different one, and they continued on the same path and hit it.
Oh my
And a
gosh.
lot of this case was to do with those communications in the cockpit, which meant the pilots weren't paying 100% attention.
Right, right.
So, because of that or other accidents like that, the FAA comes out with rules about what they call sterile cockpit.
Okay.
That means below 10,000 feet, and below 10,000 is the area where you're coming into land or you're close to airports at that time. It's still pretty high up, but it's close enough. Now, below 10,000, you will not talk about anything else other than what you're doing with the actual activities on the airplane itself. So when it comes to the public, the FAA introduces a whole number of rules to prevent those things from happening again.
Happening again.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. We don't know that, right?
Yes,
But it's nice to
right.
hear that they are very proactive with that. So that way it makes flying much safer.
Definitely, yes.
So here's my next question for you. How does media coverage of plane crashes impact the public's perception of flying safety and contribute to fear? And I think like that goes back to what I was saying in the very beginning. Like in the
Yes.
last year, we've seen so much. Do you remember that one plane? I'm not going to mention the airline, but the wheel fell off and it hit the car.
I don't recall that one, unfortunately.
It happened. I promise you that
Yes.
happened.
I can believe it, yes.
Yeah. So you see that kind of stuff
Hmm, hmm.
and it just kind of it feeds into your fear. You're like, I don't want to be on a plane where either the wing is coming off or it's
Right.
caught on fire or the wheel is now off and we're gonna have trouble landing probably. So like how do you think the media coverage impacts our view on all of
Sure.
this?
I think part of the problem is the media is not necessarily out there to report the entirety of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see, okay, this incident happened,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore safety was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But the media doesn't go back and tell you what led up to those events,
Right,
and,
right.
and whether or not what they're reporting was really critical, or was it just something that's considered by the media to be not safe. So the
Mm-hmm.
media's perception of some things is to be unsafe. Their perception of what's unsafe
Mm-hmm.
is in some cases a normal event that may happen. And one example, I think it was at Los Angeles, when an airplane is coming into land, we have what we call a go around.
Okay.
And a go around basically means an airplane is coming into land, it's ready to land. Something happens, either the pilots determine that their approach into landing is not ideal,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be the airplane on the runway which just landed hasn't cleared the runway in time, or in some cases maybe an airplane is ready to cross the runway, but has not started crossing, and maybe somebody thinks it's going to cross or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So in those cases, the airplane, what the pilots will do is they won't continue with the landing. Instead, wherever they are, the altitude they're at, they'll carry on and start climbing out for a safe departure again, only to come back and land. And that's a totally normal event. There's nothing unusual about having to do that.
So is that like when we're up in the air and then the pilot says we're gonna circle back or something, they say something similar to that.
Yes.
Is that what they're referring to? Like, we don't have the
Typically, yes.
clearance.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, yeah, typically, for example, if they're getting low and they have to go back around, that's usually a go around. I mean, you might be circling for other reasons, but that's typically not a go around.
I know one you told me before is that sometimes they have to kill off the fuel, right? It's too
Um,
much.
there could be a lot of airplane that are coming into land, so they have to sequence them in.
Oh,
Like, for
okay.
example, an airplane may only be able to handle one plane every minute or every 2 minutes. So what they end up doing is they delay other airplanes and they keep them circling up in the air until it's their turn to land.
Oh,
But the go
okay.
around with the media, going back to the
Mm-hmm.
media question,
Mm-hmm.
is when media reports things like this and says, "Oh, this airplane was coming into land and it went back around again.
Right.
It was a near miss." Um,
Oh,
but you're not understanding or you're not defining what you're classifying as a near miss. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
in some cases, they take a picture of an airplane that's on the runway and
Mm-hmm.
they say, "Oh, this plane was about to go onto the runway, and so they had to go around." But
Mm-hmm.
wait, we didn't see that plane go on the runway yet. And so what the public sees is just that result, and
Yeah.
so it's not a complete picture of what's actually happening. And further
Yeah.
to that, if there is something that happens, then the media is very rarely going to follow up, and even if they did, the public's not going to come back 6 months later and say, why did that incident happen,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and what was fixed to prevent it from happening again, right?
Right, right, right. So you said near miss, right? I remember you told me that you were also in that situation when you were with a student.
Yes, I was.
You want to tell us a little bit about
Um,
that?
sure, it was. So I became a flight instructor in the mid '90s, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd gathered up many hundreds of hours of teaching and flying. And this was one particular case where I was flying with a student, and we were flying in the Bay Area. We were flying down to an airport, and
Mm-hmm.
what ended up happening is, so we were flying into what they call a non-tower airport.
What does that
Um,
mean?
in the old days, they used to call them uncontrolled airports, but that gave public a misnomer or a misconception that there's no control there. A non-tower airport means there's no air traffic control there to guide you in or help you there.
Oh,
So what
okay.
ends up happening in those situations, you as the pilot, you talk on the radio and you tell other pilots where you are and what you're doing so they know what you're up to.
Okay, one second. How do you know what planes are up in the air?
So the rules are, when I say the rules again, like the FAA has provided a lot of guidance in how you should operate at those kind of airports.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is if you're flying into an airport where there's no tower, like San Francisco is obviously a tower airport. It's a huge
Yeah,
airport.
yeah.
If you
Can
go
you
to,
imagine if they didn't have a tower? It'd be chaos.
planes will be flying all over the place
I
all day,
know.
all day. But then you go to another little airport, let's say like Watsonville, there's no tower there. So because and you know to put a tower in, to put air traffic control in costs a lot of money. So when you have small airports where there's not enough flights, it doesn't justify it.
Okay.
And to keep those airports running,
Uh-huh.
they run under the operations of non-tower airports. So basically, what you do is you're flying to the airport, and let's say you're 10, 15 miles away,
Okay.
you will call on that radio frequency that that airport is using, and you'll say, "Hey, to the people in the traffic, let's say so and so traffic, we are
Mm-hmm.
15 miles north of the airport. We're coming in to land.
Mm-hmm.
We're at 3,000 feet."
Mm-hmm.
So people at the airport say, "Oh, there's an airplane north of us. He's at 3,000." They can start looking that direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then when you come into an airport to land, airplanes don't just come hiddly piddly. They have a specific way of coming in. There's what we call the pattern. There's a specific
Okay.
pattern you must follow. And that way, what happens is when you tell other pilots, "I'm at this location, I'm at this location," and those locations are like, "I'm on upwind," or "I'm on crosswind," "I'm on downwind," "I'm on base," "I'm on final." Those tell other pilots that they know specifically where to look for you.
Okay. Okay.
So what ended up happening on this flight, it was a training flight. I was flying a light twin engine airplane on a
Mm-hmm.
training flight. And we were going into this airport, and we had just landed, and then we were going to take off again. And
Mm-hmm.
we had heard another airplane saying they were about 3 or 4 miles, 2 or 3 miles coming in to the airport from like the south west.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're at about 2,000 feet or whatever. So in my mind, I look at that. Okay, they are in this location. They're ahead of us, but they're too off to one side and they're higher. So right now, it's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we take off, and as we're climbing, we call that the upwind. We hear the airplane saying that they're going to now join the downwind leg. Downwind leg is, again, it's a part of a pattern. The pattern is a rectangular shape. And
Okay.
they're saying they're going to join that pattern at a certain location, certain position.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue our takeoff. We've taken off. Our landing gear is up. We're climbing out. We're now going to turn left to stay in the pattern. And
Mm-hmm.
because they announced their position, we're
Mm-hmm.
looking in that direction to see where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And they should have been way to our left, about maybe half a mile out.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're turning onto our first part of the pattern,
Mm-hmm.
we're climbing slowly, and we're just about to roll level, and all of a sudden, I see this plane pop up in the windshield, and
Oh
and it's
my
and it's, it's like
God.
literally you see nothing to your screen is literally full of a plane.
Jeez.
So
That must have been terrifying.
you don't have time to. It's amazing. You don't have time to think. It's not like
I would have frozen.
it,
I
well,
would have been
well,
done. I
well,
would have been done.
well. The thing is, that's part of flying, right? I mean, the training. Going back to your original safety issues,
Yeah.
pilots go through so much training, so much intense training that you are taught these things to a point where they're muscle memory.
Mm-hmm, hmm.
So when this plane literally filled up our windshield, we were only at probably about 700 feet, 7 to 800. I just basically pulled back and turned left as hard as I could. And as we fly over the other plane, I hear a big bump.
Oh.
And I knew we hit them at that time.
Oh, you did hit them.
That was a mid-air collision, basically, yes.
Oh my God. I did not know that part of it.
Well, parents sometimes don't tell their kids everything, right?
Oh my God.
So we hit them, and as I
Uh-huh.
rolled the wings level to carry on the direction I wanted to go. So going back, one thing was where they said they were going to be isn't where they were. They were in a different
Okay.
location. They were in a different
Oh,
position.
okay, okay.
So we were looking where they should have been, and they weren't there. That's
And they
why
weren't there.
we
Okay.
got caught totally off guard.
Right, right.
And once we collided,
Uh-huh.
I continued flying and trying to get the airplane to the position where we were now flying parallel to the runway, getting it set up for landing.
Mm-hmm.
I look over on the left wing, and the left wing is literally destroyed in the end.
So
Um,
how hard it was to land that plane? I can only imagine.
there was loss of control to some extent where it wasn't flying as good as it should have been, obviously,
Okay. Okay.
because the left wing tip was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
But as we and I mean, as we carried on, it became clear the airplane is still under control, which is good.
Okay.
And as I set up for the land, by now I'd taken over control, so my student was sitting there doing nothing on the other side. So,
Whose fault was it? Was there
um,
it was
so the other plane should not have been where they should have identified themselves as being in the location they were, and they didn't.
oh, so that was their mistake.
That was
Okay,
their
number
mistake
one.
in identifying.
Right.
But at the end of
Right.
the day, the FAA looks at this, hey, you're flying in clear conditions. Everybody should be looking out for each other, right? So
Right.
it's one of those things where, there's accidents. A lot of the accidents happen, in like the different phases of flight or certain phases of flight.
Yeah.
And certain accidents, they happen at non-tower airports, where we were at, on
Mm-hmm.
a clear day, which is a clear day,
Mm-hmm.
at an or low altitude, and that's where we're at.
Mm.
So it's ideal conditions for that to happen, and it was one of those things where that chain of events led to that accident. And once we landed, we looked at our left wingtip. We kind of breathed out a deep sigh of relief that we were still alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously.
And the other airplane came soon behind us, and they parked
Uh-huh.
close enough to us that obviously their wingtip was destroyed as well.
How much in damages was that? Are you able to share that or no?
I don't know the amount. I mean, it's literally at
Okay.
that point in time you just want to kind of go home and not think
And
about
hug
it.
your kids.
And I think the following week I was flying back up again. I think
Oh my God.
a week later.
Okay, so you're obsessed with plane crashes and given the fact that you watch them all the time, not all the time, I should say, that's a lie, but you do frequently watch them. And
Yes,
what is the one plane crash that stands out to you that where you go, that could have definitely been avoided? That was like, it was major, it was in the headlines everywhere, but as a pilot, you know that like, okay, these are the things that happened, or and they could have avoided all of this from happening. What is the one that stands out to you the most?
I think the thing is, it's very easy for us to become like backseat pilots or
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's very easy to analyze what went wrong and why they
Mhm.
should have done this, that, or the other.
Mhm.
So I definitely don't want to come across as a backseat or a sofa pilot in that respect.
Mhm.
As a background, I do have a commercial pilot's license, so I've been flying for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I speak from experience, but also
Mhm.
I don't speak from the point of view of what these pilots went through, because being in their shoes at that time, I'm sure was not easy. But the
Mhm.
Tenerife one to me stands out as the biggest one, where there were so many little things that could have been done differently, some very small things that would have prevented that. And there was changes that came out because of that, what they call
Mhm.
CRM or co- um, called crew resource management, where there's better ways of crews to communicate to each other, to make sure everybody's on the same page about what's
Mm-hmm.
happening, and that you don't have this hierarchy of authority where a co-pilot cannot talk to the captain. These days everybody has almost equal authority in that respect, and has a opportunity to voice their concern. But the problem these days still is in Asian cultures. I think a lot of that authority is still well respected, so you've got to have to be very careful in how that's played out.
Oh, okay, okay. Do you remember that one? It was, I don't think it was a plane crash, but I remember seeing the image of it. Uh, Something happened. I don't know if it was just a cockpit or into the entire plane, but the pilot was flying, like got sucked out of the window. Do you remember that? And he was
I
hanging on.
I remember watching that air accident or
Oh,
air
you
disaster.
watched it.
Yeah, I watched that one. Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about that, a little bit more detail? Because
I
I did
don't
a horrible job
I
explaining that.
don't remember the exact cause of it,
Okay.
the reasons behind it. Um, but if I remember correctly, and it's been a while since I watched this particular one, but
Mm-hmm.
the windshield on the captain's side, I think, blew out.
Okay.
There was either fractures or cracks or whatever. I'm not sure
Mm,
exactly the reason behind it, but
mm-hmm.
if I remember correctly, the windshield had blown out
Okay.
and the captain had got sucked out.
Okay.
And he was part way out and part way in, and I believe the co-pilot was holding him in by the legs.
Oh my
And
God.
then other crew members came in to help.
Uh-huh.
But essentially, they had to, I think, land the plane with the pilot either half out most of the way. I'm not sure if they were able to pull him back in or not, but you imagine that happening at altitude where the outside temperature is like minus 30 or minus 40 or whatever.
Yeah, because I remember he was his whole face took a huge hit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy when you hear things like that. You don't hear of cases that bizarre,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or as bizarre as whereas one of the airplanes, I think, are coming from Hawaii. One of the top portions of the airplane ripped off, and the passengers were sitting looking at the sky.
Oh my God, that happened?
Yes, that happened.
What year?
I don't remember the year on that particular one, but
Oh my God.
I think it would have been
This
the
is why it's so important to wear your seatbelts, you guys. I
this
don't do that.
this is why you want to wear seatbelt. Yes,
Yeah. Because
I
like you
think.
get comfortable. You're just like, oh, the seatbelt sign is off, so I can take it off, you know?
Well, the thing is, we as humans, we do things based on our experience. If nothing's ever happened, we believe nothing's ever going to happen again.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and pilots don't put those lights on just to play games with you. They put them
Right,
in for a
right,
reason because even if there's, I mean, a plane top roof blowing out like that is very unusual. I mean,
right,
that's
right.
one in a million. But coming across turbulence, that could happen anytime.
Yeah, yeah. So with that plane, right, did they land properly? Like, how did they handle that? Do you remember reading about that or
I don't,
listening?
yeah, I don't remember all the details. I believe, I think there might have been one or two fatalities on that airplane
Okay.
because everybody wasn't seatbelted in, I think.
Oh,
Um,
so you're saying that someone probably was sucked out
So,
of the
yeah,
plane?
yeah.
Oh
I
my
don't remember the
God.
details, but they were able to come back and land, and majority, most of the people, nearly all of the people were fine.
Oh
But
my goodness.
I'm sure that trauma probably didn't help people who were already scared of flying. You're
I
pretty.
don't know why that makes me laugh. I'm not laughing at what happened. I'm just laughing at the fact that, like,
Probably the way I
I'm
said
just
it.
imagining myself being there, you know, like I would never ever want to fly again. If that happened on my flight, I would never get on a plane again.
So the purpose of this is obviously not to scare people about flying, right?
Yes,
And
I know. It's to
the
help
thing
them
is,
overcome their fears and
overcome the fears,
understand.
and we'll talk about that in a little when you're ready. But I did want to voice another little a very funny story. I was at an airport ready to board a plane, and behind me were the crew members, the captain, the co-pilot, and I think a few of the flight attendants.
Hmm.
And the captain was just relating a story to them about how he was on one flight and this passenger was basically so nervous he wouldn't sit down or didn't want to sit down. And they had to
Hmm.
go back a few times to calm him down, get him to sit down in the seat. And the captain said, convinced him, persuaded him to sit down, reassuring him of how safe flying is, how There's very few accidents out there. Things don't just happen like that. The public is
Mhm.
maybe too fearful in some cases. And he told him how everything was going to be fine. Don't worry about it. No problem. They took off. The airplane took off. Soon after takeoff, one of the engines failed. And the captain was sitting there saying, he said, I was sitting there thinking, my gosh, I told that one passenger this, and we now have an engine failure.
Oh my God.
The way he said it was very kind of a funny way, you know.
Right, right. So one other question that I had was when something like a windshield cracking or, coming off the plane,
Mhm.
how how many times do they, check those before the plane is ready to take off? Like I know there's maintenance done, like how often does that happen? And or is it just based on, okay, we've checked this and it's good to go and we're not going to check it unless there's a concern?
No, good question. A lot of the time, a majority of the airplane parts, if you will, or areas of it, they
Hmm.
don't need to be specifically checked. In the case of like that windshield, I don't remember the details of that, but I know there's other cases where a lot of the times you see something like that happening. It's happened because maintenance was done at some point in time
Hmm.
and it was done incorrectly.
Okay.
And
Okay.
maybe there wasn't sufficient checks, maybe there wasn't good oversight.
Uh-huh.
Somebody took a shortcut, somebody neglected to do something properly,
Mhm.
to rush the plane back into service again. But
Mhm.
usually things like that only ever happen when some work has been done in that area.
Okay.
So, for example, when you're sitting there on your seat and you're looking outside the window,
Mhm.
there's no need to check that window because nothing's going to happen to that.
Right,
It's
right.
designed not to happen.
Okay.
Um, and if the work is done properly, then nothing will ever happen. But it's just the one few times where mm, uh, maybe they cut corners or they were rushed to do certain things, and that's where things go a little awry, and it's mistakes are made in those circumstances.
Like with cars, right? Like they crash test them, right? Just so that those,
Right.
they know whether or not this car is not
Yeah.
they
Hmm.
don't do they crash test every car or is it just the model itself?
Just the
Because
model.
no, I don't just a model, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because they don't I'm from what I know, they don't do that with planes, right? I mean, they don't have the money to do that.
They do. They do.
They do?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They
Okay.
do. They do crash testing. If you go onto YouTube, you'll see some interesting crash testing they do.
Oh, wow.
Because they want to see things like if a plane crashes,
Uh-huh.
then where's the biggest impacts,
Okay.
and what
Okay.
happens to people that are seat belted or sitting differently? What's going to happen to them?
Mhm,
And they
mhm.
monitor all that stuff and
Oh,
to see
wow.
what's happening.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
And not only that, I mean, just to kind of put a little bit of ease,
Mhm,
um, when you look at the wings of an airplane,
mhm.
you would think they're rigid, but the
Okay.
wings actually flex up and down. They actually move
I've
up and down.
Are you talking about the flaps that we see sometimes that go like this?
No, at the end of the wings, the wing
Uh-huh.
tips will go up and down, and you never think of them as being flexible.
Oh, okay.
But you have to have that flexibility to allow the airplane to kind of cope with a lot of forces,
Mhm, mhm.
load. And when they build a plane, they will take a plane and they will bend the wings up until they snap off to see how much force they
Oh.
can take.
Oh, wow.
When they
Okay.
look at the landing gear where the plane lands on, they will put that into big like holders, or big kind of areas where they hold the landing gear. Then they spin the landing gear up to the speed that the landing gear will be at landing, and they drop
Mhm.
it and see what would happen.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot, and they even like the jet engine that you have.
Mhm, mhm,
They'll run that jet engine at full speed in this big facility,
mhm.
and then they throw something into it to see what happens if it breaks apart or not.
Wow.
So there's a $5 million jet engine they're going to destroy just to see what
Just to
happens.
see. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
exactly. Yeah,
Oh, damn.
because you see the blades in a jet engine are traveling very fast. They're turning very fast. So they want to make sure if those blades break off, they don't come
Mhm.
out through the engine and into the cabin and kill people or
Mm.
destroy other things.
Oh,
So they want to
okay.
make sure that everything is contained inside that jet engine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
pretty amazing what they do. And again, a lot of the public doesn't necessarily get to see that unless you really look for it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, they do a lot of testing to make sure that everything is going to work way above and beyond what it's designed to do.
Okay. For someone who is terrified of flying, right? What
Mhm.
is the single most important piece of information you'd want them to take away from our conversation today?
I think one of the things is to understand that although airplane accidents are going to happen or have happened,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's one of those things where one of the as a flying community sometimes will say aircraft have accidents very rarely happen.
Yeah.
But if a mistake is made, the end result is very less forgiving than other things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
because there's such um, big impact or fatalities that happen, it's a very big thing. But accidents generally are very rare in most cases. Um, but I would say to the general public in terms of or help tell people to try to alleviate their fears it is definitely still true. Flying is definitely one of the most safest ways of traveling.
Right.
And in terms of where we are today, um, things are done today. Safety features have been put in today based upon what has been understood as failures in the past.
Hmm.
So things are put in to prevent those from happening again.
Hmm.
I mean, you have airplanes back in the old days where you had a cockpit full of instruments which were very hard to understand or look at, in respect of how many you had to look at and interpret. And these days, everything's computerized. So you've got autopilots, you've got computers running things. So the pilots have much, much more time to monitor things and make sure things are safe.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
also, just one other thing is essentially is when it comes to commercial flying. And I know you mentioned about the San Diego crash just recently, but in
Yeah.
terms of commercial flying, pilots just cannot go and do whatever they want. I mean,
Hmm.
there's no room for you can do this your way. Airlines create what we call, or what they call, should I say, standard operating procedures, which tell pilots what they can and cannot do.
Hmm.
And those procedures are put in place to make sure things are done safely.
Now, that just reminds me of the plane crash that
Mhm.
had Kobe Bryant in it with his daughter. I
On
think
the
they were six,
helicopter,
eight.
right? Yeah,
Was it a helicopter? Sorry.
yeah. Mhm.
So I remember we had that conversation, and you said that like you raised a concern there. Do you remember that what that was?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, one of the things is it's they had chartered a helicopter
Mm-hmm.
from a company, and it was unfortunate, but the conditions, the environment wasn't very good for flying the way they were flying.
Okay.
And this is part of the problem is when you are going to smaller places to fly, they may
Mm-hmm.
not have operating procedures which are well defined,
Mm-hmm.
or pilots may have a little bit more leeway to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were flying back, my understanding was essentially they had hit some bad weather, so they were
Mm-hmm.
flying lower, and one thing led to another, and the helicopter crashed. In situations where you have, let's say, a commercial airliner flying, they would not even let you fly under those conditions.
Oh, okay.
They would
Okay.
specifically say before you even take off, you have to have this kind of clearance,
Mm-hmm.
this route, to make sure the safety is taken care of. So you would not even be put into that position where things become,
That
that big.
dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, what are some common misconceptions about plane crashes or aviation safety that you like to debunk?
I think it's very easy for people to maybe just assume, oh, something on the plane broke and the plane crashed.
Right, right.
And I think if you um, and again, not everybody has the time or things aren't always available in a way to understand how these accidents happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to kind of put people at rest in that respect is when we talk about a chain of events that cause an accident, it definitely is a whole number of events that have to happen
Mm-hmm.
cause that accident to happen. And in the world of commercial aviation, commercial flying, you have so many people involved that those links can be broken a lot quicker than when you look at it from small planes flying where there's only one pilot.
Okay.
You have air traffic control, you have the flight crew, which is the captain, the co-pilot, you have the ground control or ground maintenance crew, which can help if things go wrong as well. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
number of people that can help to kind of um, jump in and help when things go bad.
Okay.
Whereas when you're flying, like you said, the San Diego plane, which crashed
The smaller ones.
416, it's probably only one pilot on board, and their operating procedures aren't as strict as airlines. They very rarely are because they want to be able to fly under a lot more conditions and a lot more flights than maybe airlines would otherwise.
Oh. Do you think that the same rules and regulations should apply to the smaller planes as they do to the commercial?
It's one of the it's a very questionable area because by
Oh.
doing that, what you do is you prevent a lot of people from flying,
Mm,
and it's usually not a it's a minority that end up getting into these situations usually,
mm-hmm.
and it can make it look worse for other people and put a lot of rules and regulations in place which prevent them from flying, and they're totally safe pilots.
Okay.
One example was I remember there was a pilot that just recently got their pilot's license. Again, the chain of events was he took off from an airport and he didn't fill up with full fuel,
Uh-huh.
thinking he was going to make it fine. And he would have made it fine, but then he neglected to take into account that he was going to pick up some passengers from a different airport, and that was a little further away.
Mm-hmm.
Then he had to fly to his destination,
Mm-hmm.
and there's certain things you have to do to make sure the airplane's flying and using fuel properly. And if you don't do those adjustments, then the airplane will use more fuel than you think.
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening was basically all of these things could have been looked at, cleared up by just filling up with fuel in the beginning. But because all these other little things happened in the middle on the way as well, what ended up happening was when he landed at the destination, he had to go around,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't enough fuel to go around, and the plane crashed.
Oh my God.
So again, this goes to show you that in it's a very fundamental thing that I've always learned, and I always teach students, and a lot of people follow these rules where make sure you have full fuel. Why not have full fuel if you're flying? There's no reason not to,
Right, right.
right?
Better to be safe than sorry, right?
Like they say, fuel on the ground is useless, and altitude above you is useless.
Fuel on the ground is useless and altitude above you is useless. Can you
So
explain that to me?
yeah, basically what that means is if you don't fill up with fuel,
Uh-huh.
that fuel that you didn't fill up that's sitting on the ground, you should have taken with you. That would have helped you.
Right.
And the altitude above you is if you're flying very low and dangerous, if an
Uh-huh.
engine fails, you don't have any altitude to figure out where to go. So the higher
Uh-huh.
you are, that altitude will help you give you more time to do things.
Mm. Interesting. That was a thinker for me. I didn't get it straight away.
It's well, the thing is, it's one of those things that you when you're in the aviation community, you talk a lot about that, but it's not
Yeah.
something you would. It's like when I say, if you need $10 to take with you, if you leave it at home, it's better to have the
Hmm.
money and not spend it than need it
Yeah.
than not have it, right? Same kind of
Yeah. Yeah. The only time, like when we've been on flights, the only time that where we experienced something that could have been prevented was,
thing.
and I still keep saying it's LA, but you say it's Dallas. But basically, you guys, what had happened was we were coming back from, where were we coming back from?
We had left Italy and we changed in North Carolina.
So we're coming back from Italy and we're gonna make change in North Carolina. And somewhere along the line, someone decided not to do their job and didn't clean out the bathrooms on the plane. So we had to make not emergency landing, but
Diversion.
we had to they had to divert us, and instead of us coming straight home, we had to be put in a hotel, and then we
Yes,
had to come home the next day. And we were just like an hour away from
right.
San Jose,
Yeah, yeah,
flight wise, like not drive, but like yeah. So that was the only time where we experienced something like that that made you think like, okay, why is this happening? I mean, they told us why it was
right,
happening, but it makes you think like, okay, wow, like just because the bathrooms weren't cleaned out, this is the result of that,
right,
you
right.
know?
And the thing
So
is, what we won't see from that is what happened after that. What did the airline
what
do?
happened after that?
I mean, for example, we won't hear it, but I'm sure the airlines looked at that, say, hey, why was that plane diverted? Well, they didn't clean the bathrooms out. Or why didn't they clean the bath? It's going to cost us this much money. We need to make
Right.
sure people don't neglect their duties,
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. Do you think that that person who was in charge of that got fired?
No, I don't think it's. I mean, that's not the purpose of all these investigations or duty
Okay.
when they go to look at what happened. The
Yeah.
purpose of this is to look at what happened, come up with a solution, and train people to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Okay.
Because you can't put fear into people and get a good job done, because that's not the intent. The
That's
intent
true.
the intent is to educate them to a point that, hey, we might do certain things in different ways or cut corners here and there, but at the end of the day, when it comes to aviation and commercial aviation especially, you
Hmm.
don't want to be cutting corners.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up this episode?
Not nothing specific other than I think if people, anybody out there that is concerned concerned about a lot of the stuff that's been happening, I
Hmm.
think it's very easy to get caught in the media hype about what's going on,
Yeah.
and without the context of what's happening and what's not happening.
Hmm.
When you hear 4 accidents in a row over 2 weeks,
Yeah.
they don't tell you that there was 2 million other flights that happened safely.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
not try not to get caught up in the hype
Hmm.
and realize that we're all human, and I think that aviation has come a long way in making things safe and
Hmm.
continues to do that.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights with us and
Thank you for
making us
having
feel
me.
a little safer with flying,
Thank you for
especially
having
me.
me. Much appreciated.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay, talk later. Bye bye.
You guys don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Well, that was an interesting conversation. I really don't have much to add for today's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions for me, for my dad, I can definitely pass them along. He would be more than happy to answer them for you guys. And yeah, that's it. Safe travels. Stay tuned for next week's episode. It'll be the second and last episode of the season. And until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great weekend and take care of yourselves.